Can someone give me an example of isolation? North and South Rim. It's also a good example of a barrier. There's also a good example of a corridor within that Northern-South Rim division. Converging deserts is something that really contributes to the diversity in Grand Canyon. And while the map on the bottom left is actually not quite correct, we actually have 3 of the 4 North American desert vegetation types in the park. Who knows which one we don't have? Chihuahuan. Yeah, but we do have influence from it, but we don't actually have as broad an influence as the other deserts. One of the other things is obviously just the vast size of the park and the fact that it is a protected area. It's an area where there has been very little grazing. Some of the impacts that you see throughout the rest of the Southwest we haven't had in the park. And so it has provided a refuge for some of these plant species. I had kind of forgotten about the fact that we also have some really interesting things. We have a tree that is a champion. It's a cliff rose, and it's on the Register of Champion Trees. It's 19 feet tall, it's got about a 17-foot span, and it's beautiful, it's just gigantic. There's a fellow standing there. He's probably about 6 feet tall, so. It's a refuge for trees like that. How many of you are familiar with the concept of life zones? Great. And who knows about C. Miriam Park? All right. Does someone want to describe what a life zone is and how that concept came about? This is really audience participation time. It's on the slide, so you can just raise your hand and read from the slide. It was an easy way to describe and categorize kind of broad classes and fit together animals and plants into these broad zones. And the interesting thing about the concept is he was from the East Coast, and as he moved out to the West, he actually started off as a zoologist. And he kind of just started trying to piece together how things fit. And one of the things he noticed is that when you change in elevation and with changes in latitude, you see different communities. The nice thing about Grand Canyon is that we've got examples of 5 of the 6 life zones. It's on the slide too, but which one don't we have? Bowen? Lacking Arctic Alpine, exactly, so we don't have that. But the work that Miriam did was actually really instrumental in just kind of trying to classify vegetation and animals together. So I'm going to go through the life zones. One of the other things that I wanted to mention with the life zone concept is that it was an early work. It was an early kind of theoretical ecology. And it does provide you guys with a very cheap way to take your families on vacation. Because you can go to the North Rim, and then you can walk to the bottom of the canyon, and you can basically, it's as if you're walking from Canada down to Mexico. So you could sell that as a very cheap vacation option. So the first one I wanted to mention is the spruce fir forest. And I was just looking at the numbers. It's a very small percentage of the park. Does anybody know how many million acres we've got? Now there are some Park Service people here that should know that. 1.2 million acres. All right, spruce fir forest comprises about 2% of that. And it's located on the North Rim. It's an area that is really difficult to walk through. You don't really want to have a picnic in that area. It's a challenging place to negotiate, but it is special, and it is, if you haven't seen the spruce fir forest on the North Rim, I plan on going there during the summertime. The next one down in elevation is the mixed conifer. That is about 4% of the park, and I was actually surprised at this number compared to the next one that I'm going to introduce. This is one that we're learning a lot about right now. It's one that we don't know a lot about the fire history, and we don't know a lot about how to initiate prescribed burns in that area. So we are doing a lot of research and trying to figure out what the natural fire regime is, and that one is one that hopefully over the next couple of years we'll get a better handle on. 4% is still a lot when you think about 1.2 million acres. The next one, would anybody guess? Yeah, exactly. So what surprised me is that that's only 4% also. For some reason I thought that ponderosa pine would be more than 4% as compared to mixed conifer, but it's about equal. So ponderosa pine, obviously there's been a lot of work that's been done in that vegetation type. A lot of it has been done through the Ecological Restoration Institute at NAU, and we do know a lot about the fire regime, and we do know a lot about restoration in the ponderosa pine forest. It's one that is really nice to picnic in. There's a nice opening. What should like a good natural ponderosa pine forest look like? Park-like setting is often used, and that was in early descriptions too. Obviously, you see it a lot around Flagstaff. It may be in your backyard. So that's one that most people are really familiar with. Another one, as you go down in elevation, is the pinyon juniper woodland. And that one is 29% of the park. And a lot of people kind of write that one off as not very interesting or unique, and it's actually one of my favorites. It's one of those areas that if you really look at the understory diversity, it's got a lot going on. It's an area that we don't know a lot about the fire regime, and we don't know a lot about what was a historic condition. And so when we start thinking about areas that maybe we might want to restore, I think there's a large amount of knowledge that we'll need to gain in that community. Has anyone been out to Desert View recently? A couple people? You guys will be out there. That is an area where not only is it pinyon juniper, but it's actually dwarfed. So things are even a little bit smaller out there. And that's a really nice area to visit. Park-like setting, you can have picnics at the picnic tables, not off-road. The desert scrub, 56% of the park. This is everything that you drop below the rim. A lot of people also think, well, there's not a lot of diversity, the vegetation is on the rim. You often think that because of the lot of trees that are on the rim. This is an incredibly diverse area, and we have a lot to learn in this area. This is where you're going to see the bighorn sheep and the rattlesnakes and all of those typical canyon creatures that you think about. The other one that I want to mention that's not actually one of the life zones is just riparian zones. And in general, it comprises 1% of the landscape across the Southwest. But in Grand Canyon, although we are going to get new mapping data, and I'm going to talk about that, we've got 0.11, so we don't even have 1%. So those areas are the areas, how many of you have hiked in Grand Canyon? So if you see like a nice ribbon of big tall trees and water, you're probably going to go to that area. So not only will humans go there, but that's where you find wildlife and insects and a lot of diversity. So those areas are incredible refuges, and Grand Canyon, because of the land use history, we've got some of the best remaining examples of desert riparian areas. And I'll get to that when I talk about the Timbers project that someone mentioned. Plant collection. There's a long history of plant collection in Grand Canyon. It goes back to 1880, and it continues today. There have been a wide breadth of folks, both men and women, who collected within Grand Canyon. And Richard, I was kind of hoping you were going to come and put a slide in there of Rose Collins just for you. And yay! She was the first botanist in the canyon, and she was one of those feisty women that just got out there and did a lot of collecting. And I know Richard Corderoli is working on, what would you call it, a history?
Well, I'm not quite sure what it's going to be, but an article and a presentation for you, maybe.
Excellent. He's been somewhat obsessed with her for a while. So she was just a really, really interesting lady, and that picture of her I love. Actually, Kate, I think that you put the slide together. But she did collect over 850 plants, and because she was really interested in just getting out and about, she did a lot of the early collection. And so what do you learn from plant collection?